This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email Marketing, and I'm delighted to say my guest today, this morning, not quite morning in Canada, is Jeff Ginsberg. Jeff is the Chief Email Officer at the email company. He's also about a 20-something year veteran of email marketing, and you're also the editor of the Email Guide, correct, Jeff?
I am chief cook and bottle washer.
Chief cook, bottle washer, and also quite a yachtsman and sailor, and we'll hopefully have some time to get to that. But maybe a little introduction of yourself and your company, just to orient people especially who are listening, not watching.
Thanks. Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, so yeah, I have a company and I called it the email company because I wanted to keep it simple.
Hmm.
And for the last 21 years, I've been doing email marketing, everything from helping companies find the right technology to providing professional services from strategy, data management, creative, campaign execution, tracking, reporting, the whole kit and caboodle. And um, it really is, full soup to nuts email marketing, but it started off in the trenches of, helping companies deliver messages and finding the right technology. And, we started really at the enterprise level. So, buying top shelf technology and leveraging that across all of our clients in the marketplace.
Hmm.
And that started at a time where it was so expensive to get into the technology, as well as companies in the Canadian marketplace had such small lists as compared to the US market.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. And I mean, when you started, you're talking probably
99.
servers and blades and much more, buying the building blocks of the raw technology, right?
When I started with this little company in Huntsville, Alabama called RevNet, and they sold a license. You would install it on your server. They had a group mail package as well as a distribution tool, and then they had this idea where they were going to say we're going to rent it because it was so expensive. It was 50, $75,000 a license
Oh,
to
wow.
buy, and they said, oh well, let's rent it and see
Yeah.
if that gets some traction in the marketplace. And it really was the first SaaS model that we ever
No kidding.
experienced.
No kidding.
On they would host it on their servers, and you would literally like log on and deploy your messages.
Sorry, I feel like I'm on a ship at sea. The camera was crooked. It was driving me crazy. Um, wow. And now almost everything in the email space is SaaS. Right?
Yeah. So from there, like this company, I think they were acquired by Message Media. Message Media was acquired by DoubleClick. DoubleClick was acquired by Epsilon. Epsilon sort of let the technology die that we were using. We then switched over to ExactTarget. ExactTarget became Salesforce, and it goes on and on. So we've had our fair share of exposure across, the enterprise level. Um, and from my other line of business, the email guide, there's 654 different flavors of
Yeah.
technology that can
Yeah.
all send messages, whether it's a single tool that plugs into Outlook or Gmail to a complex SaaS model that is your omni-channel platform,
Yeah.
or covers every aspect of your marketing campaign.
Yeah. And there's not just one of those either, right? There's many of them.
Yeah.
It struck me for a number of years that I'm a huge fan of cloud computing and the cloud revolution, but there were a lot of aspects of email platforms that were there before we hung that label on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and probably what's your read? Is that has that was that a net gain shift for the marketer as more of the technology pieces were basically behind the paywall, so to speak. You didn't have to buy servers, licensed technology, plug the pieces together so much as say I want to deliver this many messages.
I've lost you.
Um, is it I don't want to say better now because that's a fairly shallow question. Has the shift to cloud based, SaaS based, pay for delivery versus as you were talking about early days, this technology connected to that technology, and a company actually had to sort of be involved in the technology of email as it made the marketing side of it better.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I don't know if it's made the marketing side of it better. It certainly made the financial side of it better. There's an expression in the yachting business that says if it floats, fucks, or flies, rent it. And I bring it back to technology. Like, why would you buy it? Why would you build it when you
Yeah,
can simply rent it and you don't have to deal with the headache of owning it, of supporting it,
yeah,
of coding it, of maintaining it, and like all that other crap that comes along with ownership of
yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
You should know
No.
that very well. Like, you write code, you put it out there on the net. You know how challenging it is to, like, how challenging and expensive, and like, I'm looking, you got a full head of hair. I'm surprised. Most
It's great.
people who were in this business, like, they lose their hair over this stuff.
Yeah, because it's not nearly well. I mean, you're saying you're alluding to something fairly deep there, and it's an interesting avenue to travel. Email looks old and stable and almost a bit boring, but it's not like this stuff just keeps working day in and day out, no change, no one has to pay any attention. It's surprisingly fragile, fussy, error prone, all that other stuff.
It's interesting. I was listening to some of your episodes, and you know, I think you said it best in your first one, where you talked about the technology really hasn't changed. The technology in itself is really the same, nuts and bolts.
Yeah,
But what has changed is the complexity of delivering messages and the complexity of the message itself,
yeah,
and how marketers are using it. But pushing a message out to the door really is the same concept as it was 20 years ago.
yeah,
It's just a question. It's now harder to deliver,
yeah.
and messages contain uh, more code, of more complexity. And I think marketers are using it. Back in the day, like, we could do personalization, we could do dynamic content. Marketers were very, scared to do a lot of that stuff.
Huh. Interesting.
Today, it's second nature. If you're not doing it, you're really behind the eight ball.
Well, yeah. Glad to hear you say it. I mean, backtrack to one of your earlier sentences that the standards, right? The SMTP message body, all the pieces, all the plumbing, those are 20-year-old standards, which still just makes you go, wow. And but beyond that, there are still functional standards, IETF standards in email that are even older than that, and we still use them. I mean, I was not to brag about the gray hair, but I was at Microsoft in the '90s, before email meant internet SMTP email, when email meant stuff running on Novell NetWare that you ran inside a company, not
Right.
never, oh my goodness, email people outside the company. That's never going to happen, right? It was a huge
Right.
standard battle. And we had the debate about, is it going to be X.400 or this simplistic SMTP stuff? And SMTP won, thank goodness, because X400 would, now I wouldn't have any hair if that had won. But we didn't. Nobody anticipated that a relatively simple sort of handshake protocol would scale to 306 billion messages a day as it has. Like, wow!
Yeah.
And I know a ton of technical work from a ton of very smart folks that make it do that today. But still, the underlying sort of handshake, hi, my server says, here's a message for your server. That's old. It's been around a long time.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's remarkable. It you
Feel
you
dated
you
now, Matthew.
what's that?
Feel dated, like really dinosaurish.
I
Like,
you know
it
I
didn't take too
think
long, right? We're 3 minutes in, 4 minutes in, and now I just feel like decrepit.
uh, I think having worked through some of the early period, especially since those standards have stuck around, can actually give you an advantage in understanding the structure and the plumbing that someone who just fires up their SaaS tool and uses it to send messages, they may have no idea if they don't bother to learn, like how the bits and pieces actually work. And I would argue, I'd be curious to be your reaction about this because you've got such a broad view of the vendor market in email. Marketers can end up being somewhat prisoners of the box of the tool, right? Well, my email editor does these things, so this is what my emails look like. That's limited by the editor, not necessarily by what email could do.
Yeah.
Comments?
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It's funny, like you had, was it Massimo from B?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've got a great editor. Your tool in itself does, puts a lot of the fancy flowers into a message. I think what I recognize about most platforms in the market, their email editor sucks. And there's great tools out there
Yeah.
that either you could plug and play into your SaaS platform, or that you can use, I'm not too sure about bees, but I'm a big fan of Stripo. You know, you can connect Stripo to your platform of choice through an API and
Yeah.
pump your message. Same as, like if you wanted to code in Litmus
Yeah.
or email
Yeah.
on ASCII, you can pump those messages right into your SaaS of choice.
Yeah.
And that way you're not limited to that platform. And it goes along the full spectrum of anything else. Like you should not be confined by the constraints of your ESP.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear you say it, and it's worth noting, as we have this conversation, it was just last week, the Taxi for Email, another, sort of more capable enterprise focused email editor, got snapped up and acquired by Meeting Bird as they acquired SparkPost or vice versa. But like the market seems to be saying, there's some value to more richer, better editor instead of just what we could put inside the platform. The B proposition, you alluded to that great conversation with Massimo. They said in email editor is hard. Let's do it well, and maybe there's a market for that modular piece of technology. Turns out to have been a good bet, and I am a huge fan. But are we starting to pull some of the coherence of just, how do I say this? Just fire up the tool and focus on the marketing message? Are we starting to pull that back apart and say you could send better stuff if you worked in this editor, not the built-in editor?
I think that's the case with, it's like buying, I drive a minivan. Like so I feel like I'm a little out of touch, but it's like, buying I'm thinking like a Honda Civic or a Subaru. You can buy the base vehicle, but there's a million and one aftermarket modifications that you can bolt on to
Yeah, yeah,
make your car a better performing car.
yeah.
And it's the same thing, like we're talking about an email editor. One of the biggest areas that we've really save time and money is in workflow process. So it's in testing, multiple variants of a message. So when you have, 20 or 30 different cells of content that are all going to switch up based on a user profile, you want to be able to see what that looks like in real life and
Yeah,
see all of those iterations and instances of it.
yeah.
And there's a lot of tools out there that don't do it. And then
Right.
there's some third-party tools that do it well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just think there's a great opportunity for whatever the SaaS platform is to look at all of the other plug and play applications. And, I think, is it Chief Martech
Yeah.
that published that yearly infographic
The
of,
Martech landscape, that one?
yeah.
Wow.
And I guess the reality is when you look at all of those platforms, they can all play with each other one way or the other, whether it's, manual or through an API or direct integration. But I think it's up to the marketer to really recognize what's the best tool for the job, and to recognize that the tool I have might not be the best tool.
Yeah.
It's the one I have, but, for a little bit extra, or a little bit of this or a little bit of that, I can augment what I don't have.
Yeah. I would confess some impatience as I'll take my host hat off for a second. As a vendor providing additional functions, additional magic in email, I I do find myself a bit impatient with email marketers. Not personally, it just seems like a lot of them are so flippin' overworked, production oriented, and just in this grind of get the next campaign out the door. They're lifting their head up to look at the realm of the possible, as you suggested.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen that often. What do you
Well,
think?
it's I think that's a typical symptom of email. And in my mind, I think it's because email never had, the light of day on anybody's P&L. So it never got money, it never got attention. It was always, the orphan child.
Hmm.
And now, they say, oh, email is our number one performing resource or source of traffic. It generates the most revenue of all of our other channels,
Hmm.
and yet they still don't, team it up like they would team up, whether it be a sales team or a marketing team or a technology team. They just, they say, oh, we'll get one or two people and they'll look after everything. And, the other thing is, we talk about the speed of business, whatever that really means, but it's like, we're constantly trying to get shit done,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to take a second and uh, figure out what's the next tool. I don't want to deal with the next tool. Most
Mm.
marketers will say it's like, I got enough problems with this tool. I don't want
Yeah.
another problem, or I got
Yeah.
enough issues or headaches, and I don't need any more work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's a problem of, sorry, I just want to say, I think that's a problem of corporate culture, because corporate culture is like, well, not always, but it's for many years, it's been like, how do we get the maximum out of our employees
Mm.
and work them, whether it's 9 to 9 or 8 to 10 or whatever the hours are. And,
Yeah.
I've always been of the mindset, like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, go home and have a life.
Yeah. Amen.
It's like,
Here, here.
really, like, if you have to provide, if you can't get it done within the day, then either you're incompetent or we're overtasking you.
Well, you just like I want to put a marker and just like boom. There's the snippet that I want everybody to hear because I couldn't agree more. You're also saying that a lot of companies really underinvest people, time, etc. in their email marketing program.
Yeah, I think I look at it's getting a lot better. It's
Is
getting
it?
more. I think so. Well, from 5, 10 years ago, for sure,
Okay.
it
Okay.
is.
Interesting.
Because 10 years ago, it was really an outsourced world. People didn't even have people internally to do it.
Agency or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and now they've got at least one or two or three headcount. Some teams have 5 and 10, but if you look at some of the industry surveys, there's
Hmm.
very few companies that are pushing more than three people on their email team.
Yeah, yeah. Email teams. I agree. You probably have better data on it, but it does seem like email teams, even at surprisingly big companies, not talking about a big group.
Yeah,
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 which means they're stressed, overworked, etc. And that back to earlier note about it's not quite as robust as it looks on the surface. If someone's got to check that the sends are working, it's going to be one of those overworked people, and it may be midnight when they got to log in and do that. And I go, well, that's your job, so go ahead and do it. And then you've got the dichotomy. Carrying this a little further, you've got the dichotomy that the list. It's not just a list, but that set of people you've got a relationship with and a connection method with your email list is a huge asset, right? If you're selling your company, that's one of the things that's going to get valued. And like the dichotomy is, if that's so important, why do we underinvest in the people who steward that asset?
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. The other thing is, I think we're sending a lot more messages, right?
God,
The
yes.
retailer that would send one a month is now sending 3 or 4 a week.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
not every day. Plus,
yeah,
then there's the transactional messages,
yeah.
and the list goes on and on. Then there's the automations, and so like it's nonstop. And
Yeah.
then the marketers, like bucket me and you in that, say, well, you got to do it better. You got
Yeah.
to make it, more relevant. You got to make it,
More personal. More, yeah.
show up on all of these different devices perfectly, pixel
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
And it's got to have that, captivating Instagram effect. Like, people don't have the time to read their mail. And like, it really is, one of the notes I was making, the future of email, like it's an Instagram world. Like if you're on Instagram or Facebook, like this idea, and I know your readers
Hmm.
can't see this, but I'm like fingering through,
Flip, flip,
swipe
flip.
left, swipe right, up, down,
Yep.
whatever you want.
Yep. Yep.
Like, it's like we have no attention span, and we're bombarded by a trillion messages a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And implicit in what you said about an Instagram world, and I very much agree. And this is a hobby horse I'm guilty of riding way too much. It's 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 a much more visual, quick gestalt. Get the idea, get the impression, and email. In my humble opinion, and I have a dog in the fight. Email is just starting to catch up with a more visual first, more design first sensibility. Like, I'm sorry, you can't copyright your way to success if people are not allocating time to read it. They're not, for the most part, allocating time to read every word in your email message.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the problem is it was that way when email was all text based,
Mm, yeah.
and now that it's a lot of it's all visual driven.
Hmm.
Again, it's really hard to break through that clutter and that noise.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is, and it takes hook two pieces together. It takes more and different resources to make a more visually compelling, more visually meaningful message than the email team probably has, and it's a different skill set too. Right?
Yeah,
Like if you don't have a dedicated, uh, visual designer, how are you gonna maintain that volume of 3 or 4 a week and make them compelling and eye catching and digestible in the less than 11 seconds that people spend on
yeah.
an email. So we may see. I'd be interesting to see if we see a retooling of email teams to say, ooh, because don't tell me the web team doesn't have someone who pays attention to that. The web's a very competitive landscape design wise. Now, if your website sucks, your brand sucks, to put it bluntly. So of course you have to pay attention to that. Of course it has to be pixel perfect. Meanwhile, you can send out ugly emails, and I don't know if you can keep getting away with that. So I think we're agreeing.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Ugly emails don't generate sales. Like, I don't know, there's some sort of meme happening.
Now let's dive in from a different direction. You have kids. How old?
Well, my daughter is 18, so she's old, and my son is 17, so
Okay.
he's old. They're
Old.
not like little kids anymore. Dang.
Digital natives, though, right?
Yes, they
And what are your 17 and the 18-year-old like? They know you. They know that email is part of your life. What's their perspective on email?
I don't think they have a perspective on email.
It's
You
just
know, and
part of the landscape.
it's so like, yeah, and look, at I gotta ask them because they'll have an opinion on Instagram, on Snapchat,
Hmm.
on TikTok. And look, my kids are not techno nerds by any means. Like my son, both my kids, they don't game. My daughter just got on Facebook, only because she's going off to university, and there's a Facebook group
Yeah,
um,
the new class.
specifically for kids of her age who are going first year to this university.
Okay,
It
cool.
wasn't like even to go see the university
Yeah,
online or to
yeah.
be part of the university, but it was to be part of the group of, to be
Incoming
part of the
fresh.
conversation of the kids that she knows who are going to that university.
Mm-hmm.
My son's not a gamer. He,
Mm-hmm.
he watches people playing, I don't know if it's Minecraft or whatever, like on Twitch, which I don't get anyways. Like, why would you sit there and watch someone play a game versus playing the game? And yet that is a whole, like, that's a whole industry to itself. But
Yes, it is. Big
but
one.
I don't think that they realize that they couldn't do any of this without an email address.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, if I wanted to reach them, I sure as hell wouldn't send an email. It'd have to be a text message.
Right. Right. Right.
And the
Right.
ringer's always off.
Interesting, really.
Yeah.
Ringer's always off. So you just said implicitly you wouldn't call them, you'd text them, you wouldn't email
If I
them.
call them, like it goes right to voicemail. And I'm like, really? Why am I even paying for voicemail on their phones?
I have two boys and they're slightly older, 21, 25. And I set them up with email addresses somewhere in the mid teens, not because they asked for it, because I knew they'd need it eventually. But I watched them, and email became sort of a conscious piece of their cycle as they hit that applying for college stage, because colleges were like, we're going to email you this. And they're like, oh, I guess I have to pay attention to my email. I'm like, yeah, welcome to the world, kid.
Right.
And now I'm sure both of them manage multiple inboxes, get multiple messages. I doubt they think of it consciously, which I think was your point about your daughter. Like, yes, I have email, but it's just like part of the plumbing background
It's a
noise.
nuisance. It's one of those other channels that
Yeah.
like is just bothersome. And
Yeah.
what I wish I want to I gotta look at people can't see what I'm doing, and you're gonna edit this out, right?
I'll edit whatever you want, dude. We'll put a test signal in.
Or we're gonna do a one-shot wonder, right?
That's it.
I want to show this to you. You're gonna like this. What's this a picture of?
Well, I would say a phone.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that. A rotary dial phone where you hated people. $241 for a rotary dial
Well,
phone.
whatever. Forget the price of the rotary dial phone, but it's so funny. I was looking at this thing. I was actually looking on. I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace because that's like one of my favorite sites. Forget
Interesting.
Facebook itself. I love Facebook Marketplace, or in Canada we have Kijiji, which is kind of like a Craigslist with nice pictures and
Okay.
lots of ads. Um, and so I saw this, like some guy was selling like rotary dial phones, and I said to my wife, I'm like, we should buy this for the kids and make them call your cell number. Her cell number is 990
Yes.
8 6. Like, so like it's like one of those, oh my god, I'd have the worst number if
Yeah.
that was
Yeah. Yeah.
your number, and we still had rotary dial. It's like, if you had to get like some nines and zeros in there, like that was brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that. And your finger would get sore.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Harking the dial over
People would
there.
use like a
A
pencil,
pencil.
and then they would have that little piece that would go on the headset so they could
Yeah.
do this and get a crink in their neck all day.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so the technology has changed. Our lives have become a lot simpler, but it doesn't mean that everyone adopts to it,
That's
right?
true. That's true. And it also doesn't mean, let's go back to what you said about text and make an intersection point here. There's a tendency to assume that new channel or device X will replace old channel or device Y. And what happens if you look at the history of this stuff, I mean, this is my field, they don't. The old one actually tends to stick around, find a fit for what it does particularly well, and leave some running room and daylight for the new. We're not getting net the same number of messages now that we did 20 years ago. We're getting a lot more. We're probably getting more email messages than we did 20 years ago, even though we've got all these other channels competing for our attention on top of the mix, right? It's like,
Yeah,
oof.
crazy.
Yeah, crazy, crazy.
Yeah,
I grew up in a town so rural and so small that we had 4-digit mechanical dialing in the town and party lines at the edge of town. And going
right.
from that experience to everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket and nobody knows anybody's number is
Yeah.
like, wow, this is wild. This is something to see.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, we're locked down with COVID, like really locked down, nothing's open. And so anything you need is curbside. And so I needed something from the hardware store. And like stupid me, like every time I dial their number, I never save it to my address book. I go back onto Google Maps and look up their phone number.
Yeah, yeah,
And I don't know why, look, I have an Android phone. I don't know why Google Maps doesn't allow me to save the contact, like that map address
yeah.
as a contact, but it's like, you know, I could just make it a lot simpler. Um,
Oh, that's a
but
great
yeah,
idea. I
yeah,
hope Google's that's a great idea. I love that idea. The
just push
save
a button,
place.
save to contact, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Why not?
That that uh, that actually
Save the
makes it.
name, save the address, save
And
their
all they'd have
social,
to,
like their save their social media channels, like
yeah,
all of that stuff.
all they'd have to do is package that up in a vCard URL. Like the pieces are already there to do that. Believe it or not. Interesting.
What the hell are we doing talking email when we could be doing V-card thingamajigs? Got to come up with a better name than V-card thingamajig, but
Yeah. Well,
you're onto something hot.
yeah. Speaking of old standards, there. What texting has come up a couple of times. And I had a really great conversation with Kenneth Burke of a company called Text Request. He initially said, "Well, why are you inviting a text guy on the future of email?" And I said, that's an important channel, and there's some aspects of it that are similar enough where it makes for a healthy conversation. What do you are you involved at all in the text SMS MMS side of marketing?
Yeah, so we've done some, but
Yeah,
I got to say, for the most part, a lot of our clients haven't bridged the gap.
interesting.
Um, and it's funny, I'm now, I don't know how I got on somebody's channel, but they keep spamming me.
Really?
And well, it's they're not spamming me. I use that word. I never, first of all, I never use that word because it's never like a word in my vocabulary. Like, we don't, people say, why don't you want to send email? Oh, because that's spam. I don't want
Yeah,
to spam my customers. And I'm like, yeah, next.
yeah.
So, but I signed up for something, and all of a sudden it's like I'm getting all of these text messages. And for me, text messages, my wife, my kids, my friends, I need to speak to you now.
Yeah,
And yet I'm getting all of these from some retailer, and it's like I have no interest. Send me the email. I'll get to it next month.
right.
And the problem is, like, you know, as marketers, we need to break through that noisy place, like, and text is a great way to do so.
Hmm.
If you get the permission to actually text someone, like, or push notifications in their
Gold.
app, like, it's in their face.
Yeah,
it's not
yeah,
it's not ignorable.
yeah, yeah. It's a high. Sorry, to date myself again. It's a high priority interrupt, right? Like text message goes off, you will look at it.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
more than
Yeah,
an email coming in your inbox.
yeah, because that's a later. In fact, the number
Get to it.
DMA survey says the number one action with an email that someone finds interesting is to save it for later.
Right.
Which okay, there you go. I don't see. As you know, I was entertained with the conversation with Kenneth. I don't see text messaging almost for that reason really doing any supplant in the marketing vocabulary. I think your summation, if you get the permission to text message someone that's valuable, is really accurate. But there's a really finite number of those that I would say yes to because it's such a high priority interrupt.
I think I think where it will come in and have its play, and it comes along the line of, like, one of the other things that I wrote was not so much about the technology's change, but how we use it. And
Mm.
when I think about text, I kind of think of transactional. Perfect example.
Yeah.
I pull up to Home Depot for curbside pickup. I
Mm-hmm.
dial the number,
Mm-hmm.
and say I'm here. Typically, they should or could send me a text to say your delivery will be out in 2 minutes or whatever. Um, And that's where I see it would be beneficial to me, or a lot of companies are using like airlines, right? We're changing your flight, we're changing your gate.
Yeah.
So like when you talk about these high value interrupts, that's where I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
But to
Yeah.
let me know that, McFlurries are on for 29 cents, like who cares?
Right. Where it's timely, urgent, important to you, you'll accept the message on that channel. But important to the merchant, it's a little different thing, right? You may want me to buy a McFlurry, but don't
That,
text me about it.
that's why Amber Alerts come across on text, right?
That noise, I don't know who designed that, but that was a brilliant design job because I still just about jump out of the chair when that dang thing goes off.
Yeah. And it's you talk about that, I a while ago, my wife and I made this pact to turn our notifications off on our phone.
Yeah.
So it'll ring um it'll ring if like my wife calls,
Hmm.
or the kids call. Like my kids are upstairs, they don't need to call me. They'll just yell, Dad. Um, but the constant dinging of a phone is so distractive, and you get it for not just not just your uh, system messages or your calendars, but it's everything. Like every app, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or TikTok, like they're all dinging you every time there's an update, and it's like it's too much. How do
Yeah.
you even like pay attention?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So
And
we've turned them off.
you did. And are you happy you turned it off?
Yeah. So typically we'll check. Typically, we'll check email.
Hmm.
Uh, 4 or 5 times during the day.
Hmm.
My email's pretty well open, or Outlook's always open, but
Hmm.
it's like, to triage and go through rather than like every minute, because you could spend the entire day in the inbox. I've been to some, financial institutions and other huge organizations where literally like it's just rows and rows of people in front of computer screens staring at Outlook.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is this what they're doing? It's like their whole world is involved in the inbox.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a ton of studies about the productivity cost of that. I mean, it depends on what job you're trying to get done, but almost any job requires concentration these days, and checking message after message is the opposite of concentration. I think that's what you're saying as well.
Pure distraction. Yeah.
Pure distraction, yeah. Which ironically says that one of the sort of unintended design strengths of email that will determine its continued place on our belts and on our desks is that it's pretty good at I'll get to it later. Text messaging is not. Text messaging kind of sucks for I'll get to it later. It's
Yeah.
it's it's memory and organization and search and store design even on state of the art phones is right. It's the eternal now and wants to be dealt with
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
That's a lot of. Did you just blanket turn off all notifications? Did any apps make the cut?
Yeah. And it reminds me back of the days ICQ, right? Instant chat.
Yes, yes.
Oh. But that was great. Like you could actually see the person typing, and you get it now. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if you've got an Android or an iPhone. My wife and kids are all on iPhone. Thank God I'm on an Android, because I would never, an iPhone doesn't have enough buttons for me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But in Messenger, like you can see the person literally typing. Same
Yeah,
as in like
yeah,
WhatsApp, you can
yeah,
see them. Oh, they're thinking or they're
yeah.
typing.
Oh, they're thinking
But
of
in
it.
ICQ, you could actually see letter by letter. Oh, and then backspace. Like
That's
they would.
right.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's why you have that sound. Oh, you know, like
if
somebody wrote something wrong. I did not mean to say that.
yeah, I watched you type it, dude. I know that's what you were
Exactly.
thinking.
I know what was on your mind. Yeah.
Yeah, if
Those.
God, if email did that, if it's like, oh, Jeff has a message open to me
Oh
and
my
he's
God.
typing it.
Screwed. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no, take a little
It's
time to
like if
think
our
about it before you send it, please. It's
like if
that's
our emails could only share what we were actually thinking, where like ICQ was actually sharing before we actually could finish our thoughts.
right, right. I did tweak the setting on my primary email client so that it's a 30-second delay before I hit send and it's 30 seconds before it's actually sent.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Well, it's not like I send a lot of flame mail or something like that, but like, oh, if I forgot something, if I made a mistake, because like having
Save your
30
ass.
seconds to go, oh, forgot the link, right?
Right.
Okay, that seems like a reasonable thing to me. I don't use it that often, but I'm glad it's there, fundamentally.
Like we had that in some of the earlier versions of these email tools. Like I can remember DoubleClick and Exact Target had this, 60-second countdown save your ass timer. So you would press send and it would
Hmm.
literally like give you the 60-second timer, which you couldn't actually say bypass. It was just like 60 seconds. You had to
Oh,
sit there and,
on a campaign, you mean?
yeah, you had to sit
That
there and watch this um, I want to say hourglass,
yeah,
the grains of sand dripping through. But it's like, yeah, it was like literally like watching paint dry. But it, more often than not, you would say, "Oh my God,
yeah.
I forgot something, or I need to double check something," and it would save your ass because there's no pulling those messages back.
Right. There's no undo button on that big send.
And then
Um,
comes your business. Dun,
yeah,
dun, dun.
we'll change the stuff in your yeah in your inbox. Well, we'll see. We'll see. If you take all of the companies who work in this space, that'll put the label real time around it. Um, 90, I'm gonna guess 98% of email messages have nothing, have no real time content. It's like we're just getting started. Whether or not it'll take off and go mainstream, so a wide open question. But that it's tiny take up at this point, which is maybe an opportunity. Would you mind? And again, I'm keeping in mind there may be people listening on headphones and at a commute or something like that. Talk about the email guide a little bit. Cool service.
Yeah, I thank you. So I started it 10 years ago, long before there was see, now my mind is like a blank. Long before there was G2 Crowd and
Capterra.
NetApp and all of those other companies. Like I really got to think that I was one of the first in the industry to come up with a directory model. And when I started in 2010 or 2009,
Mm-hmm.
um, email was a very noisy, noisy marketplace driven by a commoditized CPM. And you couldn't really tell the difference between all the different players. So, what I wanted to do was have a place where people could identify and differentiate the different vendors, and the vendors could come and have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I blew my brains out on publishing. Like, in
Really?
2009, what did I know about publishing? It was so brand new, the world of blogging. And I blew my brains out for a while. And then I said, you know what? I want to give it a second shot. And I rebuilt the tool last year
Yeah.
and I've relaunched it. We've got 600 and some odd different vendors, everything from, a self-service or a server-based software that you would install, whether it be on your desktop or
Yeah.
sitting on a rack, to enterprise ESP and technologies, or ESPs, sorry, enterprise ESP and marketing automation platforms, to
Mm-hmm.
everyone else in between, all of the other different ancillary tools, whether it be for copywriting, for creative services, for data management and cleansing. So when you think about email marketing, it's not just, taking my message and pushing it out the door, but it's everything from, how do I acquire addresses? How do I cleanse my list? How do I maintain my database? How do I plug and play all of these different tools into one? And what we're trying to do is tie this whole ecosystem together for the space of, email marketing and marketing
Right.
automation.
Right. And how happy are you at this point with the reboot?
You know, I'm never happy, Matthew. Like that. There it is. Bottom line, I am never happy. I suffer from the disease of I want more.
Hmm.
And what I mean is, like, I'm just never happy with what I have.
Hmm.
And it's like that. It's like the website. The website will never be done, right? We launch it when we think we're close enough, but it's never done.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty happy
Hmm.
with with the reboot, my biggest problem, and look, I hate being honest, my biggest problem is time.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, I'm chief cook and bottle washer.
Yeah.
uh, it is hard to get everything done in the day. So I have people coming there, I have people searching, I'm helping people find technology. We just launched a free email audit, so if people are actually deploying messages and they want help, just a second set of eyes, we're doing a free message audit, covers 31 points
Wow.
of
Nice.
identification that we need to be looking at when deploying a message. But I think most importantly is it's so hard to critique our own stuff. It really is beneficial to give it to somebody else and
Hmm.
just let them, what do you see? What am I missing? And it's I love watching people like putting a website in front of somebody and saying, surf, navigate, do what you're supposed to do. And they
Yeah.
like look at it, and then you look it through their eyes, and you're like, what am I supposed to do? It's like,
Yeah.
you just realize, oh, I'm missing the boat in this area, or it's not as clear or as intuitive.
Yeah.
I switched email technologies from one platform to the other. On one platform, the like go button or the enter button or the save button was in the bottom right, or in the next one, it was in the top right. Like I'm looking all over the place. I know your readers can't see this, but I'm like looking for a UFO. It's like, where the
Yeah.
hell's that button? And like it takes weeks to recognize it's in the top right
Yeah.
corner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think I suffer from that same thing, and that is, I just want it to be a little bit different, a little bit better.
Hmm.
And so, all in all, it's good. It's coming along. We're building traffic, but I still want more out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
How's that
it's a
for honest?
process, not a product. As you said, a website is never done.
It's never done.
Even a one-page website, stupid things never done.
Yeah. And look at you've got a tool, right? So user experience is critical to you. And
Absolutely.
so, like, when are you ever done with user experience? And then you
Yeah.
bring a new feature in, and
Yeah.
it's like I wish the readers could see your eyes, like spinning around in your head like a slot machine. Like
Yeah.
it's dizzying.
Yeah. 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 And how do I put this? The quest to get that, see it through the user's eyes. It's really hard. It's hard to get people to want to provide that time and input to you. It's hard to make the time and make the priority of no. We really need to see what this looks like. I hate to say Microsoft again. I'm on a binge today, but mid '90s, Microsoft had, this is desktop software era. They had usability labs with one-way mirrors and desks and cameras, and we would, before we released a product, it would be, drag people off the street, bribe them with a free copy of Excel, say, please sit down and use this thing. What am I using it for? We'll give you a scenario, but we really want to see what we didn't expect to see. We want to see what you'll actually do, and it was,
Right.
it was invaluable.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and in theory, you can make a product sort of self-instrument. It's like, wait, nobody's clicking the such and such button ever. What did we miss? But that's a whole nother layer of work in the building of the thing and the running of the thing to add to what's already a difficult task. Bah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
So
how closely do you monitor like page view patterns on the email guide?
yeah, yeah, we do, and we see where drop off is.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually that is very interesting that you say that, because last week I spent a lot of time just with Google Analytics and upgrading to what is it, Google 4?
The new one, yeah.
Yeah, and look at the insights you get out of it are incredible. I get this great opportunity with my clients that, a lot of times when we work on programs, I want to see the back end. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just show me the email, but it's, show me the e-commerce, show me the web
Full
analytics, because
cycle.
they all tie together.
Yeah,
You can't send an email out without the expectation of they need to come to the web to do something, right?
yeah,
you
yeah.
know so to look at that is really important. And I think the point that I wanted to talk about is you got to be a freaking rocket scientist to really get the full juice of Google Analytics.
Oh God,
You
yes.
know, and it's so funny because it just came up in my LinkedIn. I was looking at, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I don't even know how to pronounce his name. So I'm not even going to say it. But there's this guy, he's really smart. He was with Google Analytics and he's now on his own. And like he would just really dumb it down for everybody and show like the real simple things, what you need to know. And
Yeah.
look at, they do this, you know, you can type in these simple questions like, you know, what was my website traffic last month, or what's the most important stat? And it'll spit up some logical answers. Google's smart that way. But the biggest problem is there's just so much behind it. So when I look back into my business, I got to say, like, you know, I can focus on some of the minute details, but then you get lost in the weeds sometimes and you miss the bigger picture.
Well,
So
and learning the weed whacker is a full-time job. Kind of what you just said about Google Analytics. I've seen the nag notices about the new version. This makes me go, oh God, you know, like I scratch the surface and barely know diddly squat about the one that's been sitting there running and gathering stats for X number of years, and diving in and really learning the new one. Like,
it's crazy what it'll do.
it's crazy what it'll do. Yeah,
Yeah. And
crazy
then you
valuable,
have
but
Shopify or WooCommerce or whatever, plug
yeah,
that in. And
yeah.
like all these tools are made to plug and play. And like it's mind blowing. Plus, when we do email campaigns, we're all like peppering our URLs with these, you know, UTM codes.
Yep, yep.
Like it's just invaluable the data you can get from it. But then again, it's like, you know, as an email marketer, we said this at the beginning, like we're overtasked, we're under resourced,
Yeah,
we don't have time for this stuff.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
we need to look at it.
yeah. And it's not because it's not like there's no such thing as an end-to-end one does all system. I mean, look at the number of not just products but completely separate technologies we've riffed on in, you know, in 50 minutes here. And the marketer, the business, sorry, that's the new highways, streets, roads, road signs. You're going to have to navigate that. It's just part of how it works. We all got our butts booted online about a year ago, and we're not necessarily going back. So we'll have to navigate that. You know, if someone, if some hypothetical exec is listening to this, the best thing you can do is realize that that it pays itself back when you invest in the team and the people and the resources to do it well. It's a 38x return in your email group. Why would you not staff that up?
You can't see it because it's blurred, but it comes back to my note. Not so much about the tech, but how we use it, right?
How we use it.
So
Yeah.
it's like, you know, you look at Google and like it spits out so much. So it's not about the technology, but it's really about the resources and the people to make it work right and using it properly and getting those reports that are actionable. It's the same as about your email.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And email, we don't really have a Google Analytics for email per se, do we?
What do you mean?
Opportunity. Well, you look at the diversity and breadth of data that you get from a web page. You just mentioned it in terms of Google Analytics, and then you mentioned putting UTM codes, which are web analytics codes, in the email. There's no UTM code in the email body. You tend to at best have a tracker pixel that tells you it was opened. Like, that's pretty shallow. I know it's a big deal, but that doesn't tell me a whole lot. It treats the message as a monolith.
Right. Yeah, so we actually we tend to like platforms, like mostly B2B platforms that will give you the behavior tracking as well.
Yeah.
So you know, one of the ones we love is Active Campaign,
Hmm.
but you know, at the high end of the scale, you can see it in Pardot, and you know, a lot of other applications are bringing this in. But the idea that along each customer profile, we're going to tag and track all of their
Activities.
pages that they surf and where they go and
Hmm.
what their patterns are like. The tools are not savvy enough to um, to analyze that data. That's what you would need Google Analytics for.
Hmm.
But they're smart enough to store the data so
Hmm.
that when you want to go back and remarket, you get these actionable insights. I got a hard stop. I got 4 minutes left, but I wanted to ask you a question
What's that?
because I don't know if anybody really gets to ask you the question, being that you're the question asker. Let's say you weren't doing technology.
Hmm.
like, closed up business, whatever, what would you be doing instead of making emails look better and be more relevant?
Uh, reading and writing, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a voracious learner, and the stack of, golly, that looks interesting. I want to read that, or
Like what?
those
What do
two
you want
things.
to read or write about? Like,
Uh,
what's the hobby? What's the interest?
seriously,
Yeah.
I can't put a very good box around that. There's a half-finished manuscript on character animation that I'd like to get done. There's a book for, whoa, you just went black. There's a book for parents whose kids have the arts bugs that I would like to write. I'm extremely intrigued by the sort of broad sweep of history, particularly history with technology in it, but history period. And I haven't finished the Will and Ariel Durant, 14 volumes, story of civilization yet. I do want to get to that. So I'm not going to give you a good coherent answer, but I would have my nose in a book, and I probably come down and write code just because I want to build stuff too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, look, it's interesting because, I think one of the best ways to really like find out about somebody is kind of look at their YouTube history.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
Interesting.
the reading and the writing about even like would you say character animation?
Mm-hmm.
Like yeah, it's a whole different world than what you're in, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's probably some stuff
There's a
in
lot of
common.
similarities too, that creative aspect.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I come from an arts background and found myself in technology, and I think the two fit together surprisingly well. And
Yeah.
you came off a boat. You're doing this, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird.
Weird. And I bet if we had time to do the longer conversation, a half hour about it, talking about what you learned as a hardcore sailor and scuba diver and so on, and how that informs what you do now, would be fascinating.
It could be.
Could be.
I
Well, if
hate
you
to
get
end it
a
on such a drama. It could be, but probably not.
probably not. Hmm.
Yeah, well, it does. And I'm going to give you the short answer real quick. I think the number one thing that it taught me is to be self-reliant. That, I can get anything done that I need to get done. I just need to have the right tool.
Hmm.
And I think that's, when you're out at sea and the something breaks, the idea of MacGyvering it really does come to life.
You
And
you have to.
how do we make it to come together with, scotch tape, bubble gum, and glue?
Yeah.
And I think what I look at, and I apply that back to business, and I was just writing about this, was I know how to bridge the gap and solve technical problems with simple solutions.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
yeah.
That's a good note to end on, and I want to respect your hard stop. So, Jeff, thanks. It was a great conversation, as I knew it would be. For
Thank you,
those of
Matthew,
you
for having me. Yeah,
getting
appreciate
to
it.
the end of it, my guest has been Jeff Ginsberg, Chief Email Officer at the email company and editor of the Email Guide. Jeff, have a fantastic rest of the day. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks, Matthew. Have a great day.